Hey everybody, welcome to I Dream of Jeannie, Mistakes, Goofs, and Oddities, Season 2. So now we're going to take a look at all of Season 2 episodes and see all the bloopers and mistakes and goof-ups that happen in the show. Now, Season 2, we saw some changes. Season 2 actually saw the addition of color, which was really nice, even though my Season 1 video shows the episodes in color because I bought the colorized version. Officially, the show came out in color in Season 2. There's also some changes. Jeannie's got her more familiar-looking costume, and she gets a new interior for her bottle, and the bottle has been repainted to a very beautiful style. So let's go ahead and start with the first episode. Season 2 introduces us to this brand new animated intro that will remain from Seasons 2 through 5 that everybody's familiar with. We also get the brand new music that everybody's familiar with as well. And so I think everybody loves the animated intro to the show, which I thought was fantastic as well. Here we see Jeannie's brand new bottle, and it's funny because in this episode, it seems like it's in the scenes a lot, like the director wanted you to see that she's got a brand new bottle. The bottle, by the way, was painted so beautifully. It's just probably as an iconic of a prop as Judy Garland's ruby slippers, I would think. Everybody knows what the Genie Bottle is. And we get to see the beautiful interior that they had completely redone on this. So they got rid of the old dark, dank interior from Season 1 and turned it into this just absolutely fantastic and beautiful interior. And I think just about everybody would have loved to have a room like this, you know, a Genie's bottle. I think everybody thought that Genie's bottle's interior was just one of those things that everybody wanted to sit on that round couch and just kind of enjoy the peacefulness of it. Oddly enough, in this scene, Jeannie's smoke is actually green, and I don't know why they decided to make it green, because the rest of the episode, it's actually pink. Now, in this episode, Jeannie wants to celebrate their one-year anniversary together, so even though Major Nelson has to go up on another mission in a rocket, she decides to make Major Nelson crash back down on the same island, even though the island looks different than the original location that they filmed at. But here we can see that he finds another bottle, and it's actually the Blue Gin's bottle. And it's another Jim Beam bottle, but they just painted it with kind of a green and black wash on it to make it look really old. So the Blue Gin shows up in this episode, and he's played by Michael Ansara, who has been on a whole bunch of different shows. And Michael Ansara was actually Barbara Eden's real-life husband. And so it's pretty neat that they let him come on here. And he ends up showing up on 2 other episodes, too, that we'll take a look at once we get to those seasons. But I do think that it's pretty cool that they had him on this show. When the Blue Gin turns Major Nelson into an insect, you can see it's actually a moth, but they got such a close-up on it that you can actually see that there's a wire holding it up, a very thin wire right here, right in that spot right there. So they actually suspended the moth with a wire. Once again, we see here that Major Nelson's house has been redecorated in this part of the house. So it's been completely changed. We have the bar over here now, and the kitchen door is over here. Now, the kitchen door will stay there, but they're going to end up changing all of this later on as well. And then he's got kind of a dining area right in here. So it's funny how many times this section of the house has been changed. Now, when Major Nelson tries to fool the Blue Gin into believing that he's got more powers than he does, he uses the TV with the remote to make the Blue Gin think he's got the power to have armies, or he can create hurricanes and typhoons, and fires, and jets with bombs. And you can see that Major Nelson has the remote control of the TV behind his back, but it's just funny that he just happens to be able to flip channels, and all these particular things happen to be on TV, like the bombs and the armies and stuff like that, to make the Gin think that he's got all these powers. Now, Major Nelson shows up at NASA, and of course Dr. Bellows is in complete disbelief because Major Nelson's supposed to be lost and everybody's out looking for him. So he tells Major Nelson to stay in his office while he goes to get General Peterson. He was always telling General Peterson about all the crazy stuff going on, and then whenever he brings General Peterson back to his office, Major Nelson's gone, or whatever that was supposed to be happening got changed because of Jeannie. So what never made sense about this is, instead of having Major Nelson wait in his office, why didn't he just take Major Nelson to General Peterson, and then that way nothing could happen, like him disappearing or whatever. But of course we couldn't do that because if they did that, then we couldn't keep making Dr. Bellows look like he's going out of his mind. So it was just kind of a goofy plot device that they would use for the show. At the end of the episode, the blue djinn comes out of the water, but you can actually see how the makeup is coming off of Michael Ansara. You can see his flesh underneath the chest area and his arms. And you can see how just his face is covered in makeup. It looks really strange, but he must have been in the water a while where the makeup washed off. And right here you can see where the makeup looks like it wasn't even applied to the back of his neck right here. So just his face is covered. It looks really strange. This is episode 2, and it's called Always on Sunday, and we get a really good close-up of the Genie Bottle, and we can see the beautiful paintwork that was done by the art department. I think during this episode they were still trying to decide what Genie's blink was going to sound like, because they used a different sound effect for this particular episode. And normally we're used to hearing this sound effect. Later in the episode, Jeannie's sad and she thinks she's going to have to leave Major Nelson, and we see her wearing this totally different outfit. Now, it's interesting because it's only the second season, and this outfit would later be seen as Jeannie's sister's costume. So it's kind of unusual for this particular episode. Now, I'm not sure, but during the filming of this episode, I think Bill Daly, who plays Major Healy, I think he may have got a cold the week that they were filming this, because if you listen to his voice, it sounds more hoarse.
Yeah, he's out on the patio. He's feeling awfully depressed. Maybe you can cheer.
This episode is called The Rich Tycoon, and in this scene, Major Nelson is actually supposed to knock over some stuff right over here. But now if you watch closely, Larry Hagman is waiting for the right cue line. When he hears the name Mr. Huggins, that's when he's supposed to knock this stuff over. But if you watch, when Dr. Bellows is talking, you'll see Larry Hagman lower his hand there, getting ready to knock it over, and then it wasn't the right time yet, and then he hears Mr. Huggins, and then he knocks it over. So watch as this all takes place.
A visitor for me? Who is it?
See right there, he puts his hand, and then he knocks it over. In this episode titled Wild-Eyed Master, when Dr. Bellows and General Peterson are talking to each other, you can actually see up in this upper left corner right here, you'll see the shadow of the boom microphone. Right there, see it? It's pretty cool. This episode is called What's New, Poodle Dog? And I remember this episode because there would be two different versions of this that I would see on TV all the time. Sometimes they would say Miss Universe, and sometimes they would say Miss Atom Bomb, and I could never figure out why they kept changing it. In this particular version, Major Nelson does say Miss Universe.
Miss Universe?
Right there. And but in other subsequent episodes I would watch, you could tell they dubbed over his voice and he would say Miss Atom Bomb. And also they dubbed over Major Healy saying it as well. So it was my understanding, I think I read it somewhere, that they couldn't say Miss Universe. I guess it was kind of like almost like a copyrighted thing back then. And so if they used it, they would have to pay royalties or something for it. Well, by this time this show was in repeats, so they didn't want to do that. So somebody, I doubt they probably got Larry Hagman's voice, maybe they did, to have him dub that over and say Miss Atom Bomb. But it's a really interesting thing. We'll see this again in another episode later on, and I'll discuss that part when we get to it. There's a scene in this episode as well where Jeannie's getting ready to smoke out of her bottle, but the cameraman goes a little bit too far to the left, and you can really see over here in the corner, right here, you can kind of see where the edge of the Genie Bottle set is. Now, you can usually see that anyway on either side on several episodes, but on this particular episode, they went really far over here, and you can actually see where the set ends. There's also a continuity error in this scene right here because the camera zooms in on Jeannie's bottle, which is sitting right in the middle of the bar right here. But in the close-up, when Jeannie comes out of her bottle, you'll notice that there's a wall back here because there's actually a shadow. So there wasn't a wall back there before. So they probably just maybe used stock footage for that. I'm not really sure. This episode is called The Fastest Gun in the East, and it's a fun episode because Jeannie blinks Major Nelson back to the Old West, and it's a lot of fun. Now, interestingly enough, Hayden Rourke and Bill Daly are not in this episode at all. But in this scene right here, Larry Hagman actually screws up his line. He's supposed to say, "As long as I'm Marshal of Gopher Junction, ain't nobody gonna get killed." Well, he accidentally screwed it up and got it backwards and said, As long as I'm gopher of Marshall County, ain't nobody gonna get killed. So here we go.
As long as I'm gopher of Marshall Junction, ain't nobody gonna get killed.
And it's hilarious. So they did a quick cut right there, so it makes me wonder if everybody started laughing. In the episode titled How to Be a Genie in 10 Easy Lessons, Jeannie, at the very end of the episode, blinks Major Healy onto this iceberg, and it's interesting to see how snow actually floats on the water right there. Probably made out of potato flakes. I think that's what they used a lot of times for snow back in those days. Jumping ahead now to the episode titled The Girl Who Never Had a Birthday, Part 2. Now, this was a 4-part episode that kind of was dragged out over the course of a month when the show was first aired. And I don't know, I kind of feel like they let this go a little too long. But the good thing is that each episode was kind of an episode in itself, with this continuing story of Jeannie not knowing what her birthday was. And also, Roger Healy becomes kind of irritating in this set of episodes. I mean, you almost get a little mad at him. But here in part 2, Major Nelson decides to let Jeannie have a birthday, and she invites all these famous people from history. But he gives her this really cool Genie Bottle necklace right here, and you can see it right there. It's a neat little gold Genie Bottle, and I think it's really cool. I wonder if the prop guys made that, or if it was just an existing thing that just happened to look like the Genie Bottle. But it's really neat, and I wonder whatever happened to that prop. This episode is called How Do You Beat Superman? So Jeannie whips up this guy out of the thin air. His name is Tony Millionaire, to make Major Nelson jealous. Now, in this scene, Jeannie blinks to make some gloves appear in Tony Millionaire's pocket right there, but the sound effects people forgot to add in the sound effects, as we'll see here. And right there they appear, and it's a really odd cut because there was no sound effects. Also, if you'll notice, Larry Hagman actually, because of that freeze that they have to do to make things appear and disappear, he actually has to hold that pose that he's in where he's laughing. So right here we see that Larry Hagman is laughing. Now when she blinks, he's got to hold that pose because they have to do the freeze, and then a stagehand will put the handkerchief or her gloves in that pocket. But watch how Larry Hagman has to hold this laughing pose right here. See right there, that was where the jump cut was. So that means he had to be in this odd position just for that effect. And you'll see this happen a lot of times. Now, this is the first episode where Jeannie's smoke effect was done using a smoke bomb. In most of the first season, they just used optical effects, and even in this season, they were using a lot of opticals. A lot of times when Jeannie blinks out of her bottle, they'll have smoke come up that's actual smoke, and it was probably a fire extinguisher. And I'll explain more of that effect in a later video. But here, you can see the smoke is coming out right here. Now, if I go frame by frame or slow motion, and I'll try to pause it. So there's actually a smoke bomb that's doing this effect right here, and you'll actually be able to see the smoke bomb here in just a second. Right there. So now you can actually see it right there. So the smoke bomb is on a wire, and then of course they have a stage person covering it, but you can really see how this comes down like that. And then they do some editing here to put Barbara Eden in that spot. One of the things that I really appreciate about these old shows is all these special effects had to be done practically. This is before CGI, so I have much more appreciation for this stuff because they really had to be on their toes with this stuff and come up with clever ways to make things happen. Now, in this scene here, Jeannie blinks away Tony Millionaire, and when she does, she's at this awkward angle. But now when he disappears, they have to somehow make Barbara Eden floating in that position. So I'm guessing that what they did, and I'll go slow motion here, is that she was probably standing straight up and then let herself fall back, and they probably have a pad down here on the floor somewhere where she can fall into. But now as we go in slow motion right here, she blinks, and then Tony Millionaire disappears right here. And now there's the cut right there. Now see how she's in midair at that angle? And then she lets herself fall back. That could not have been an easy effect to do because they had to time it just right. And when they edit it, when she's at that awkward angle right there, they have to make sure they get it right. But you can imagine how much physical activity that they had to do on this show. I mean, it was a very physical comedy. Also in this episode, we get a really rare glimpse of the roof of the loft. They never show this up here. In fact, I always figured the set didn't have a roof on it. In fact, and it probably doesn't normally. because they usually have lights and stuff up there. But for this particular scene, they actually had to put a roof on there, which is pretty neat. This episode is called My Master the Caruso, and it's a really funny episode. And this episode also marks the end to the 4-episode-long story arc about Jeannie's birthday. Now, this is another one of these cool moments where they use the smoke bomb effect for Jeannie's smoke. Now, as I zoom in on this and do slow motion, you'll see the smoke bomb once again, and you can actually see the wires that are holding it up as well. So we're going to do some slow motion here, and you'll see how the picture transitions to the effect. Right there, you can see the smoke bomb. You can really see the smoke bomb right there. I mean, it's very, very obvious, and it's actually a big wad of cotton or something like that. And you can actually see the wires holding it up. There's 2 of them, and you can actually see the connector points on those as well. So we can see it coming out of there as it goes across the screen there. Now, I think the smoke is pink for the smoke bomb, but for the larger smoke, when Jeannie appears, it's actually white. Now, here we see the smoke bomb moving across again, right here. And then when the smoke drops, now at this point, what they use is it's a fire extinguisher. They actually have somebody that's, you can't see down below, and they're shooting the fire extinguisher straight up. Now, as we do this right here, you'll see there's a transition. You can see how it's a little blurry now because that's because Major Nelson is doing the freeze right here. And at this point, Barbara Eden has already walked into the scene. Now, by having the smoke constantly blowing and billowing up, they can do a cut without the smoke looking too different because smoke is smoke. And then here we see she appears. Now, this smoke is particularly thick in this scene. Now, you'll notice as the smoke dissipates, see how it's white? That's because the smoke actually is white. Now, notice on the table how there's a pink light casting on the table on the paper. That's because they have a pink light shining on the smoke to make it look more pink. But you can really see the pink lighting on all of the table settings down here. So that's how they do that effect when they use the more practical effect of Jeannie's smoke. Now, as I mentioned, Hayden Rourke, who played Dr. Bellows, was so good on this show because he was really good at the befuddled look on his face. This scene made me laugh because Genie gives Major Nelson the voice of Caruso, and he can actually break glass. And at this point, we see that he breaks glass all over. Oh, I love Dr. Bellows' reaction. When Dr. Bellows puts on his sunglasses, you can see the reflection of the studio light in one of the lenses. And when Major Nelson's voice shatters Dr. Bellows' sunglasses right here, if you look in the reflection of the light, you can see that the glasses are actually whole, the lenses are actually whole, and they're actually clear lensed glasses, but they just put some darker film on here to make it look like they're cracked by leaving some parts of it clear. But because the light is reflecting on the clear part where they're supposed to be missing glass, you can see that the lenses are actually whole. In this scene where Dr. Bellows and General Peterson are working out in the gym, if you look up at the wall right up here, you'll briefly see the shadow of the boom microphone. Right there. See how it's kind of goes down for a second? In this scene, as the camera pans to the right, look around this section right in here, and you'll see the shadow of the camera go across these guys. Right there, see?
Yes, sir. I'll certainly try.
It's really neat. So the shadow of the camera got into the shot. The gentleman here that plays the musical director that Major Nelson is going to be on the show, and this guy here is the musical director. This is actually Frank Duvall. He really was a musician, and he did a lot of music for a lot of TV show, movies. He was a composer and a writer, and in fact, you'll see the name Duvall on a lot of TV shows, and I think some movies too. So he really was a very accomplished musician and composer. This episode thankfully wraps up the 4-part story arc about Jeannie's birthday. For whatever reason, they dragged it out over 4 episodes. So this was the final one, and as you can see here, she puts Major Healy in that mummy case with the spikes because he kept teasing her by not telling her what the date was. So spoiler alert, this was Jeannie's birthday. It was April 1st, and she was born in the year 64 BC. So that was her birthday, in case you're wondering. This episode is called The Greatest Lover in the World, and this is the introduction of Emmeline Henry as Mrs. Bellows. So we did see Emmeline Henry in the first season as a guest appearance of a character, a totally different character. This time she appears as a regular or semi-regular character on the show, and I love it because Mrs. Bellows and Dr. Bellows end up being some of the funniest characters on the entire series. This episode is called The Greatest Invention in the World, and it's a great episode. Jeannie inadvertently creates a uniform that can't be destroyed, and then in the process, Dr. Bellows ends up destroying 3 of General Peterson's uniforms. it's a great episode, and I absolutely love it. But at the very end here, we get a guest appearance by Groucho Marx, and I talk about this in my Genie Bottle video, which I'll put a link down in the description below, where I talk about the Genie Bottle and different interesting things that happen on the show. But in this particular scene, which I'll show you right here, so there's Groucho Marx. He makes a cameo appearance in this episode. Now, what happened with this, it was very interesting. Groucho, they asked him to make an appearance for the show, and he actually didn't want money for the show. He said that what he would accept for payment is he wanted a brand new TV. So I guess it was Sidney Sheldon or one of the producers said, okay, so they sent him a brand new TV. It was delivered to his house, and oddly enough, he wanted it put in the closet. So they went through all this trouble to install it in this closet. And then when he's all done, the guy that installed it, he says, Groucho Marx says, well, where's the clicker? And the guy looks at him and goes, the clicker? And Groucho says, yeah, the clicker, the clicker. He was referring to the remote control. And the guy looks at Groucho and he says, well, this model doesn't come with the clicker. And he just looks at the guy and says, well, get it out of here. So they had to haul it all the way back out again. And eventually they finally did get him the TV that he wanted, but it's just funny the story that went on with this. This episode is called My Master the Author, and the guest star on this episode is Butch Patrick. Now, Butch Patrick, we all know as Eddie Munster from the Munsters, but here he looks like he's a little older, so this was obviously after the time that the Munsters was made. Now, in this scene, Butch Patrick is chewing on some gum, but if you watch closely, he's going to take the gum out of his mouth, and if you watch his right hand over here, watch how it kind of goes out of camera range.
Anything to eat around here?
Okay, so he was swinging it, but now you'll notice it stops. That's because out of camera range, they're taking his spitty gum out of his hand and switching it with something else, because probably Larry Hagman didn't want his spitty gum in his hand.
Sure, we got cookies and milk in the kitchen. Just
So that was it's probably like a piece of clay or something that they swapped it out with. That's my guess anyway. Now this little girl is General Peterson's niece, Gina, and she's very, very shy. And so he sends her over to Major Nelson because he supposedly wrote this book about kids, of being an expert about kids, but it was actually Jeannie that wrote the book, and it got him in all this trouble. So now he's trying to take care of Dr. Bellows' bratty nephew, Richard, and then General Peterson's very shy granddaughter, Gina. Now, it's kind of cool. In this scene, Jeannie blinks this doll of Genie.
I'm just trying to...
right there. And I think you get a close-up of it here. Right there. And so I think this was a real toy doll that came out at the time. I think it's by a company called Libby. And so here it is. It's only the second season of the show, and they were already merchandising the show. And I think this was probably put in there strictly as a merchandising type of thing to make kids go out and buy the Genie doll. But it's kind of cool. Now, in this scene, I thought this was a cool little detail that they threw in here. I mean, they certainly didn't have to do this, but if you look at this little cup right here, Jeannie is actually hiding inside there, but for a little moment here, you can actually see a little Jeannie pop her head out of there.
Gina's talking.
Right there. And there she is inside the cup. I thought that was really cool. How neat that they would actually go to the trouble to do something like that. This episode is called My Master the Spy, and it's the one where Jeannie blinks Major Nelson in two different places at the same time, and then Dr. Bellows thinks there's a spy at NASA. So it's a great episode. But the only thing that I could find that was weird or different about this is they do these transitions where they go from one scene to the next, and it looks like they're moving the camera really quick, so it streaks. Normally it's a sound effect or something, but in this particular one, it's actually a voice, like somebody singing, and I have never noticed this before. Right there. That is so weird. When I first heard that, I couldn't believe it when I heard it. It was really, really strange. I've never seen that in any of the other episodes. In this episode titled, You Can't Arrest Me, I Don't Have a Driver's License, Jeannie accidentally gets a ticket for going down a one-way road the wrong way. Now, if you watch here now, the officer is played by Alan Hewitt, who was better known as Detective Brannon on the TV show My Favorite Martian. But here he plays a cop. Now, as he tears this ticket off, right here, right there, now you'll notice the top of the ticket has got a rough edge to it. But in the shots when we're looking at Jeannie from over the shoulder, see how it's more smooth? So obviously these were done in two different takes, and Alan Hewitt had to tear two different tickets off. So it's kind of weird. And then when we go back to the far shot, and then you will see Jeannie holding the ticket right here. Now we see that it's got the rough edge on it. So they obviously had to do this scene twice, probably to get two different camera angles. Near the end of the episode, in the courtroom scene, we see Jeannie is really tiny, and she's next to the judge's gavel. So we see the big, huge gavel right here. But right after that, we see the judge smacking the gavel down. But you'll notice that the gavel is still right here next to Jeannie, but you can hear the gavel smacking down. All right, now this episode is called One of Our Bottles is Missing. It's one of my favorite episodes, and there's a lot to talk about because there's a lot of things that happen in this episode. Now, in the very beginning, Major Nelson and Jeannie decide they're going to play ping pong, or hubito, as Jeannie calls it. Now, it's kind of an interesting little thing here. Jeannie blinks to give Major Nelson a ping pong paddle, and you'll see it appear right there.
Have a hubito paddle.
Okay, and then it's just very brief, and then they show this close-up all of a sudden of the paddle showing up. So it's like I think the reason they decided to do that insert shot is because it's so obscure to see that right there that I think they were maybe worried that the viewer wouldn't notice it, so they did a close-up of it. This scene here is interesting because Dr. Bellows and Mrs. Bellows show up, so Jeannie blinks herself invisible. So now Major Nelson here is playing ping pong with an invisible person, but it's interesting how they did this effect. Now, I'm assuming there's like a sheet of glass right here because there's a couple times where the ball bounces in midair. You'll see it right here. Right there. See how there's like, it doesn't hit anything?
Who's winning?
Okay, so it's really cool. Also, I love that Mrs. Bellows is in this episode because both of them together are great, Dr. Bellows and Mrs. Bellows. Now, in this episode, Mrs. Bellows wanted to unexpectedly drop in on Major Nelson, and while she's kind of walking around the house, she sees Jeannie's bottle, and she falls in love with it, and she wants Jeannie's bottle. Now, Mrs. Bellows is a little pushy in this episode in the fact that she insists on being able to make a copy of this bottle. Originally, she was just going to take the original and then, I mean, you just walk into somebody's house and take something of theirs. But anyway, she decides that she wants to make a copy of it. So they're going to go to a place called Salvatore & Sons to have a duplicate made. So just moments later, after they were playing ping pong, Jeannie is furious that Major Nelson let Mrs. Bellows take off with her bottle. So she's saying, where am I going to sleep? Because her bottle's not there. And so Major Nelson suggests that she sleeps in the drawer. So Jeannie's like, well, why don't you sleep in the drawer? So she miniaturizes Major Nelson to sleep in the drawer, and she gives him one of her veils as a blanket right here. But what's weird is that, they're going to go to sleep, and they were just outside in broad daylight playing ping pong, and now all of a sudden they're going to go to sleep? So that's kind of weird. Now, Jeannie comes up with this idea that when Major Nelson comes to pick up the bottle, she wants to be inside of it. And so, of course, that causes some problems because there ends up being a mix-up. But what's really cool about this episode is we see that there's actually two bottles in the same scene. And this is the only time we ever see it in the entire series. So, I've always wondered how many Genie bottles they made for the show. Nobody really seems to know how many there were. Barbara Eden is the only one who has a verified original bottle that she kept from the show. There's been a lot that showed up on auctions, but some of them have proven to be fake. And I even have a couple myself that I show in my Genie Bottle video that are professionally painted. So there's a lot of copies out there. But this is really cool that you can actually see two of them, and you can actually see the sun is painting one of the stoppers as well. When Jeannie smokes into her bottle, they use the smoke bomb effect again, but this time they ran it backwards, so it looks like she's smoking into the bottle. Now, I really like that they have this super close-up of the top of the bottle here because you can see some interesting details. First of all, notice how there's chips all around the edge. You know, Major Nelson's pretty rough with this bottle, and there's been a few times where you can hear him smacking the stopper onto the edge. So you can see where the paint has chipped off, and you can actually see the gray colored primer that they put under there. That's like a primer coat. Also, what's interesting is you'll notice the purple isn't painted all the way down. It only goes that far, probably because they wanted to make sure that the paint doesn't stick to the cork. But it's very cool how you can actually see that the paint doesn't go all the way inside. Now, this is the first time that we get to see that they get to use the Bewitched house interiors for Dr. Bellows and Mrs. Bellows' house. So this is the Bewitched set that we saw earlier in the first season that I pointed out in the first season video. But you can see this is the exact same set, the distinctive staircase, everything else. So they're just reusing the Bewitched house, which is very interesting. Now, I remember when I was younger watching this show, I always thought the Genie Bottle was a made prop, like a prop that they actually just made for the show, but it wasn't until I saw scenes like this where you could actually see there's writing on the bottom of the bottle, and then that's when I knew that this was actually an official bottle, and that ended up leading to my search for these bottles as a kid, and since then I've collected about 15 of them over the course of many years. I love this episode because Major Nelson and Major Healy are skulking around outside the Bellows house because they're going to break into the house because since the bottles got switched, they need to get the one that Jeannie is inside of. So they decide they're going to break into the Bellows house. But what's interesting is this is supposed to be at night. Now, it looks a little lighter in this video, but you'll notice that these guys are squinting. They're actually in broad daylight, and they just put a really dark filter on the camera, so it looks like they're skulking around at night, but it's actually in broad daylight that they filmed this. At the very end of the episode, Major Nelson thinks that Jeannie is still in the Bellows house because he had already switched the bottles, and then Dr. Bellows decided to switch it again. And then, unbeknownst to Major Nelson, good old Roger switched the bottles back. So they actually do have Jeannie's bottle at this point. Now, I wanted you to watch Major Nelson's arm, right in this spot right here. As he walks along, notice that there is a purple light shining on his, see how you can see the purple on his hand? And then you'll see the pink, the pink on his sleeve. That's because they're going to be doing the smoke special effect here, and they're going to use the real smoke, the smoke bomb. And they're going to need to make the smoke look pink because it's actually white when they do this effect. Now, another interesting thing happens here. Major Nelson angrily grabs the bottle from Major Healy, and he slams it down on the table right here, and he throws the stopper. When he throws the stopper, it falls off the table, and you can actually hear it smash. So here we can hear it.
My word, get me careful.
Okay, and you can hear Bill Daly say, "Be careful," and he kind of turns to the side because he was kind of surprised by it. That was some good ad lib by him to do that, but you can actually hear the stopper smash. Also notice how the bottle is now super pink right there because it's in the pink light, getting ready for that special effect. And then, of course, Jeannie smokes out of the bottle right here, and they're using that smoke bomb, and then they use the fire extinguisher to make the major smoke so that they can do the jump cut. Now, once they realize that Roger saved the day and swapped the bottles and Jeannie ended back home, thankfully, Jeannie gives Roger his own bottle, but it's actually filled with champagne, as we can see here. He opens it. Now, it's a very cool little thing going on. Watch Jeannie's pant leg over here, and you'll see she grabs these champagne glasses from nowhere, but there's actually somebody right off to this off stage here, or off camera, and they're actually handing her the glasses, and you'll actually see the shadow of the hand handing her those glasses right here. So right here, see it? See how they're handing the glasses to her? You can see it right down here. Okay, so I'll do it again so we can make sure we catch it. All right, so once again, look right here, and then I'll do this in slow motion so that you can see the shadow. See how there's the... She reaches for the glass, and she doesn't have to look because the person who's handing it to her makes sure that she gets it. Right there. That's 1, 2. It's really cool. I love it that you can see that. And there's the third glass. I love that. I love when you can see stuff like that. The episode titled My Master the Civilian, there's only a couple things to really note in this episode. So they're looking through the past and future machine, Jeannie and Roger are, and here we see they're reusing another set from Bewitched. So this is supposed to be Major Nelson's luxurious office job that he gets. And here we can see that it's the reuse of Larry Tate's office from Bewitched. So this is the set that they would use for Larry Tate's place. You can really tell because of these windows over here on the side. This is also the first appearance that we see of the past future machine, which is pretty cool looking. I think they also called it the Stereopticon as well, but it'll show up, I think, at least one or two more times in the series later on. Now, this episode is called There Goes the Best Genie I Ever Had, and it ends up being a clip show. And for whatever reason, a lot of shows have these clip shows where after it's been on for a while, they start to show you clips from past episodes. Now, this effect right here is actually kind of elaborate, where Genie is floating into Major Nelson's room. You can see the way they did this. I mean, this must have taken a long time for them to set this up. I would love to see the rig that's up above the ceiling area, how they made that work, because she floats in very smooth. Now, the wires that she's floating on are actually relatively well hidden, but you can kind of see one of them running up her side right here. And it's interesting to note this little piece of fabric right there. That's because the wire is actually pushing into the side of her hip right there. And so they actually added a piece of fabric so that you don't notice it as much. Also, you'll notice that she is sitting on a little seat right there, which is kind of cool. And here you can really see the seat that she's sitting on. It's kind of like a little silver thing. And when she turns more towards the front, you can see the wires are actually pushing against her knee right there and over here. So it must have been kind of a tight little fit to get on there. She had to be dead center on that thing to make it work. Now, after a close-up of Jeannie, they cut back to this far shot, but now you can see she's no longer sitting on that little seat. She's sitting on something else because the wires aren't digging into her knees anymore. So she's actually not on wires anymore. She's sitting on an actual platform. In this episode, they start talking about Miss Atom Bomb and Miss Galaxy. Now, I think this is the one that I was thinking of where they had to dub over their voice. It looks like Major Nelson is saying Miss Galaxy, but before that, it looks like he's saying something else. I think he said Miss Universe and Miss Galaxy. I'm not really sure.
You mean Miss Atom Bomb and Miss Galaxy? Yeah.
See, the way you could tell it was dubbed over for some reason, and it's done again when Jeannie says it, but you can't see her mouth, but you can tell that there's a difference in the sound. Here's where Jeannie says it.
Miss Atom Bomb and Miss Galaxy are in town.
Oh, yeah, well, look,
So you can kind of tell there's a difference in the sound. That she obviously had to dub that over it too. So they must have originally recorded it saying Miss Universe, and then there was some problem with saying Miss Universe, and then they had to dub over that. When Major Nelson is laying in this hammock, you can really see the wires that are supporting it right here. They're supposed to be invisible. From far away, they are relatively invisible, but here in the close-ups, you can really kind of see it moving around. And there's the one on the other side is actually pretty well hidden. But yeah, they're pretty visible, especially near the foot of the hammock as well. Now, I gotta be honest, this episode always kind of made me mad because, first of all, I think Major Nelson was kind of mean wanting to send Jeannie away, and you just feel really bad for Jeannie because all she ever wanted to do was help Major Nelson. I mean, yeah, she gets him in a lot of trouble, but you just feel sorry for her. And then also when he sits there, in this part, he says, "Do you remember the last time you tried to make me comfortable?" And then they start showing clips of this past episode where he had this bed of nails right here. And see the book that she had right there? That book was a book that he made her read. He insisted that she study that book. It was like the Book of Arabian Nights, and it had all these tortures that genies do to their masters. And all these clips right here were some of the tortures. So he made her do that. So that's why I didn't like this episode. I mean, it wasn't even her fault. That was his fault, not hers. When Jeannie smokes out of her bottle right here, she's sad, and so she's blue. And so once again, they're using the smoke bomb, but you can see the blue light on it isn't quite catching all the smoke because the smoke near the top is kind of white right there. And then when he tells her, "Don't be blue," she starts sweeping away the smoke, and watch her hands. She's got blue light on her hands. See right there? So that's where they use the light to color the smoke. This episode is called The Greatest Entertainer in the World, and kind of a notorious episode, not because of what was going on in front of the camera, but more what was going on behind the camera. So this episode, I mean, you'll never look at it the same again. There was a lot of tense moments while they were filming this episode. So Larry Hagman, this is according to Barbara Eden with her autobiography, and Sidney Sheldon, the producer, in interviews, he said that Larry was a strange guy, and Barbara Eden said he was a troubled man. He was an alcoholic. He had some drinking issues. He would be drinking champagne throughout this show. And Larry was constantly fighting with Sidney Sheldon about the scripts, and he was always arguing with him about it. And he just made a lot of people's lives really, really difficult on the show. He was very blunt. He would say things to people that he just should not have said. Larry got so bad that he was doing things like urinating on the set and throwing up on the set. He would show up in weird outfits. He showed up in a gorilla costume one time. Just random weird stuff that he would do on the show. And so he was clearly not at a good point in his life. Now, during the filming of this episode, he said something to Sammy that really made him mad. Now, I think he was ordering Sammy around and giving him stage direction on where to stand, how to move, what to say. And Sammy didn't need that. He was an experienced actor, comedian, and entertainer. He didn't need those kinds of things. And so something was said that made Sammy Davis Jr. so mad that they weren't speaking to each other at lunchtime. When they broke for lunch, they weren't even talking. So somehow they managed to get through this episode and get it filmed, and you'd never know those problems because the episode is good. It's very good. But by the end of the filming of this week, he comes up to Barbara Eden and says, he just said, "How can you stand to work with this a-hole?" And he said, "If I ever have to work with this guy again," he says, "I'll kill him." So Sammy just absolutely did not enjoy working with Larry Hagman, and Larry Hagman just didn't make it very pleasant for anybody else on the show, unfortunately. Barbara Eden mentioned that whenever there was a guest on the show, a guest star, especially if it was a male guest star, Larry Hagman was not very nice to them. Talk about not making them feel welcome to be a guest on the show. But it's almost like he was jealous and had ego issues because he would make it very clear that it was his show and kind of make sure that they knew that. And the only person that would really keep him under control when he got out of control was Hayden Rourke, who played Dr. Bellows. And that's because Hayden Rourke was very good friends with Larry Hagman's mother, who was Mary Martin. And so because of that, Larry did respect Hayden Rourke. And so whenever things were getting out of control and Larry was acting up, he would kind of put Larry in his place and tell him to, knock it off and get to work. And he was the only one that could get away with it. So that was something that Barbara Eden mentioned as well. But I was just really sad to hear that Larry's behavior on the show was so bad. Barbara Eden also mentions that the crew on the show didn't like Larry either. They would do things to him just to get back at him, like put salt in his tea. And so, little things like that. But the crew didn't even like him. So it's just really sad. This episode is called My Master the Pirate, and it's another one of those fun episodes where Jeannie blinks Major Nelson to a different time, very much like the Western episode. In this case, she blinks him back to the times of the pirate. Now, at the very beginning of the episode, Major Nelson is wearing this wetsuit, but if you look right here, you can see there's this weird piece of tape stuck on the front right there. So I'm guessing there was probably a brand name or a logo of the wetsuit company maybe, and then they just had to stick this obvious piece of tape on there to cover it. Later on in the episode, when they're trying to escape the pirate ship, you can actually see there's a line right here under the water. So as Major Nelson is rowing the boat away, this is probably the line they used to pull them back in. And when the pirates chase after them, you can see there's a line on their ship as well. So that's just a way for the crew to pull them back in. When Genie blinks and turns their boat into a motorboat so they can escape from the pirates, if you look up here, you can actually see the line that's pulling this boat in. See how it's actually pulling them in? And you can see the disruption in the water too. So there's probably a bunch of people back here that's on the crew that's pulling them in. Or they probably even have it attached to a truck or a car or something. This episode is called There Goes the Bride. It's the episode where Jeannie puts Major Nelson under a spell so that he'll want to marry her. So she uses the spell of La Halaba. Now, in this episode, she has to get a lock of hair, an article of clothing, like a piece of his clothing, and a fingernail. Now, while she's kissing Major Nelson, she has these pair of scissors right here floating behind his head and snipping a piece of his hair off. But if you look right here, you'll see the sleeve of the person that actually is operating it. Right there. It's really neat. So you just briefly see whoever was operating the scissors behind Larry Hagman's neck. This episode also marks the first time that we get to see Haji, and Haji is played by Abraham Sofair, who is an awesome actor. I always thought he was really good, and all the different shows that I've seen him in, he's so good. He's just good at whatever he does. He's the perfect Haji. He's going to show up again in another episode later on in the series. This episode is titled My Master, Napoleon's Buddy. So it's another episode where Jeannie blinks Major Nelson back in time, and this time he gets to meet Napoleon. Now, this is another episode that does not have Hayden Rourke or Bill Daly in it, and the only thing I could really find that was kind of a goof is if you look up in this upper section right here, you'll see the shadow of the boom microphone very briefly. And here I zoomed in on it so we could get a better look, but it's going to be right up here. There it is. You can just barely see it moving around up there. This episode is the last episode of Season 2, and it's titled The Mod Party, and it's a funny episode. Now, at the very beginning, Jeannie and Major Nelson are talking to Roger on the phone, and in the background is this gardener, and as you can see, he's working on these red flowers. But in the very next scene, all of a sudden, the flowers turn to yellow. So it's a real blatant continuity error. I'm not sure how that kind of got slipped by the director and all that. It's really odd. Later in the episode, we actually see a guest appearance by Dabney Coleman, and he's pretty young looking here. Dabney Coleman actually showed up in an earlier episode. I think it was from Season 1. So it's kind of interesting how they brought him back for this particular episode. Now, he just has a brief appearance in this episode, but now watch as Dabney Coleman moves closer right here, and pay attention to what Major Nelson is saying, because you will actually see Dabney Coleman mouthing Larry Hagman's lines.
What brings you to town? Let's see, the last time I saw you was last year at the meeting of the inter-branch relationship.
So, I could actually see him mouthing Larry Hagman's lines. I've actually seen a lot of actors do this in a lot of shows, but it's interesting. I mean, everybody's got to know everybody else's lines so that they know when their line comes in. But it's interesting you can see Dabney Coleman doing that. When Jeannie is shopping for a mod outfit, we see this girl right here. Now, she has a few lines in this episode, but it's interesting because in another hippie episode, a hippie-based episode, which I think occurs in Season 3, we'll see this same actress playing a similar character, but in that episode, she plays the general's daughter. That would be General Schaefer. It's his daughter or his granddaughter. But it's interesting that she shows up in two different episodes as kind of in a hippie-themed episode. Also in this episode, we kind of get to see Bill Daly playing the bass right there. And in real life, he actually could play that. But it's really neat that they let him kind of have a highlighted little bit here where he's seen playing the instrument that he can actually play. Now, I don't know why this particular scene makes me laugh, but Jeannie and Major Nelson show up at the mod party, and there's this picture over here that's shaking from all the loud music. And then as soon as the door opens, the music completely changes, but I don't know why I find this so funny.
The best mod party I have ever been to.
You bet you haven't been there yet.
Now, this character's name is Corki with a C, and he's one of Major Healy's best friends. But the reason I mention it is because there's a little bit of a mistake made on the credits at the end. And let's face it, the best part of this episode is seeing Dr. Bellows dance at a mod party. And here at the end of the episode, we see that the character of Corki is mistakenly misprinted here as Porky. So they put the credit as Porky. Wonder why they did that. It's very strange. So there we go, all the mistakes, goofs, and oddities that I could find in Season 2. If I missed any and you knew about some that I don't know about, please comment in the comments. I'm always happy to find more of these interesting things in these episodes. But Season 2, really starts to kind of find more of the formula of how the show went. I'm glad to see Dr. and Mrs. Bellows become more a part of the storylines, which is great. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed all of these videos. I'm going to get to work on Season 3. These videos take a long time to make, so if that one takes a while to come out, please be patient. But I'm going to try to get it out as soon as I can. In the meantime, if you've been enjoying all these, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you on the next video. So thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.